Thank you, Lord Mayor. In seconding this report, I should say it brings my council career to a full circle. Some 22 years ago, I've been a councillor for 23 years, half the time of the eminent Albert Bohr. But 22 years ago, as a young councillor, I chaired a task force, a scrutiny task force, entitled Education and Training in Regeneration, which colleagues would notice is a very similar theme to the one that we're discussing here and now today. The contexts were very, very different, but there are some very similar themes that still run through both reports, looking at them. The context was different because what we were looking at back then was a time of abundance, when large sums of cash were being put into communities, and the questions were, how was that cash being used effectively? How was it being used to change people's lives, and was it succeeding in doing so? And I would encourage colleagues, particularly those who are involved in matters going forwards, when some of these things are returning, £20 million Pride in Place schemes are being put in place into small communities, I'd encourage you to take a look at that original report and just have a look at some of the lessons learnt from those times and the difficulties you face when there is abundance. This report, this current one, emerges from a time when regeneration has taken place very often through public-private partnerships, through private investment, and the council's had to use every lever in its power to make changes and to make a difference. The common themes are these. Firstly, that we agreed then, I agreed, and the reason I'm happy to have come back to this topic at the end of my council career is that across party we agreed that this question of skills, of learning skills, of access to training is critical to making a difference to people's lives. And the problem we've had in Birmingham in particular, but in other parts of the country as well, is too many young people have not had access to learning those skills. And in this particular report we met some very encouraging young people who secured jobs and roles and training at high-speed rail, but we thought about all those who were not getting access to that kind of training, particularly as it turns out that high-speed rail is being held up quite a lot because they don't have enough welders. A reasonably skilled job that people can learn, they don't have access to the training because the colleges don't have the staff to do the training. So the first thing that's in common is a belief that skills, training, giving people a chance to change their lives, to have a better life than they've been consigned to, is a critical task for the council and the government. The second thing that I think we agreed on is the need for good data and evidence. Where is the evidence that these projects are working? Councillor Ira mentioned the high jobless rate in Perry Bar constituency, 28%, and yet because that very same constituency had a £500 million regeneration project put in the heart of it. Why doesn't that make that kind of difference? How can it make that kind of difference? And why don't we learn from the pilot schemes we talked about from that experience 20 years ago? Why do we never learn that we're not making that kind of difference? Can we learn how, when we're putting investment in, that we can make a difference to the way people get access to jobs, get access to training, and so forth? And the final theme is accountability. And back then, we called for accountability to what were then the district committees. This report, we don't have district committees, but it calls for a high level of accountability and openness in the conduct of these projects. Not just on skills and training, obviously, but in particular in this theme, that the accountability puts the pressure on to produce the evidence, to say, what are you doing? How are you bringing young people into this? How are you introducing apprenticeships? All these possibilities that are missed and lost even when this huge investment goes in. So I commend this report to you, Lord Mayor, and I haven't got time to tell my story about after dinner speaking in Sir Albert Bohr, but another time perhaps.
Thank you.